So good morning, everyone. I have like the enjoyable position to speak to you when you are supposed to start your coffee break. You talk about coffee. So I'm eating your time, and I hope you will bear with me for a little longer to speak about the advisory bodies. So basically, she has mentioned it already a little bit, OSTIS. So we're going to talk about the parliamentarians, the social partners, and the elected regional and local representatives, and how they deal with the EEA cooperation. I've been introduced. My name is Christophe Zufferey. I'm the senior officer to the EFTA Parliamentary Committee, and it's pendant the EEA Joint Parliamentary Committee with the European Parliament. I'm working here in Brussels at the EFTA Secretariat in Brussels in the EEA Coordination Division. So the outline is pretty simple. I will just briefly first introduce what are the EFTA advisory bodies, why are they called like this, and what they cover. And then look at how these different committees and bodies do actually engage on the EEA cooperation on the various levels. And then if you have a few questions at the end, I'm happy to take them. So maybe this is one of the charts you haven't seen yet this morning, since you have been seeing a lot of these charts on EEA. But it's just to explain that basically this is the structure of EFTA at 4, the EFTA, traditional EFTA based in Geneva. And you have the EFTA Council, which are actually the member states, like the Council of in the European Union. And the Council, the member states have created bodies to assist them in the running of the organization and the initiatives that are taken. So you can see these different bodies. I won't mention all of them, but you see there that you have a parliamentary committee and a consultative committee that have been created already back in the 70s. So the Parliamentary Committee is a forum of parliamentarians from the 4 EFTA member countries, 5 from Norway, 5 from Iceland, 5 from Switzerland, and usually 2 from Liechtenstein. If more members come, usually they are welcome, but just if they have to take a decision, these are like the numbers. And the EFTA Consultative Committee gathers representatives of the trade unions and business and employer association in the 4 EFTA countries. What is their role? They have an advisory role, so they don't have any decision-making power like the European Parliament would have in the EU. They just have an advisory role. They can provide advice to member states, EFTA member states, and these committees cover the whole spectrum of EFTA's activities, policies and initiatives. So it's mainly the relation with the EU and the EEA. That's why you are here today, to hear about the EEA, and also the relation with third countries, so the trade policy of EFTA. So these 2 committees, they cover all the issues. And today in the presentation, basically I'm focusing on the number 1, so the relation with the EU, the EEA agreement, and actually the role of the 3 EEA EFTA states, excluding Switzerland, in their relation with the EU. This chart you have seen, I'm quite sure. You have seen the structure of the EEA agreement. On the left-hand side, the EFTA institutions. Some of them have been specifically created to deal with the implementation and development of the EEA agreement. Right-hand side, you know, the institution of the EU, and in the middle, there are the institutions that are created by the EEA agreement to actually implement and develop the EEA agreement. And there you see, so you have heard this morning, the EEA Council, the political body, the EEA Joint Committee that adopted the Joint Committee decisions. Finir talked quite a lot about this. And at the bottom here, you have the EEA Joint Parliamentary Committee and the EEA Consultative Committee. My slide, I think it's messing up, but basically the square is supposed to focus on the 2 round in the middle, and at the end you have also an EEA EFTA forum. It's It appears a bit differently on the slide because basically when the Committee of the Regions were established by the EU in '94, the EEA agreement was about to enter into force, and the EEA agreement has not foreseen a formal institution for the cooperation between regions in the EEA agreement. And in 2009, the member states created also an EFTA forum to involve local and regional elected representatives in the EEA. But there are informal links that are established between the two institutions, and we'll talk about it a bit later. So this is like how it works. It's exactly the same as for the executive bodies, the EEA Council and the EEA Joint Committee. You have joint bodies for the parliamentarians and social partners. So we're gonna look a bit more into detail on these different committees. So this is basically my core work. So the parliamentary scrutiny of the EEA agreement, the EEA Joint Parliamentary Committee. So you have the EFTA Parliamentary Committee that I have introduced in the beginning, meeting together with the delegation of the European Parliament to discuss the EEA cooperation. These meetings takes place twice a year. And the mandate of this committee is defined in Article 95 of the EEA agreement, and is to scrutinize the functioning of the EEA agreement. How does this work? So basically at each and every meeting, the first point on the agenda is developments in the EEA agreement, and the representative of the EEA executive bodies, so the EEA Council and the EEA Joint Committee that you have seen on the previous slide, are invited to report to the parliamentarians from the EFTA states and the member of the European Parliament and present what were the latest developments in the EEA cooperation, and they can discuss, touch upon all the various issues that are currently being discussed between the member states. It can also cover, we'll hear later on, I don't know, the EEA Norway grounds. At the next meeting, also you had the presentation on ESA. The ESA president will also address the committee. So you have all the constituents that are involved in the EEA cooperation that may appear in front of the parliamentarians to explain about the developments. What the committee does as well, so the EEA is about internal market legislation or single market. So they actually monitor the EU legislative developments that are likely or that are on the single market or on the internal market and are likely ultimately to be incorporated into the EEA agreement. So they will select very carefully the topics being discussed, and they will usually invite especially rapporteurs of the European Parliament working on specific files that are being now in the ordinary legislative procedure at EU level. So in recent years, they discuss usually very topical and current political issues. So they have been very much focusing on the pandemic, of course, and the functioning of the single market during the pandemic. But they have been also discussing also all the initiatives under the Green Deal, green transition, and the digital transition. So, for example, when they discussed the Fit for 55 package last year in Oslo, they met one of the rapporteur for the revision of the Energy Efficiency Directive, is member of the delegation on the EP side, and he actually reported on the state of play of the negotiation of this file. For example, they met also with the inter-rapporteur on the European Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, for example, or on the digital files. They have been focusing on, for example, the Artificial Intelligence Act, and they met also with the rapporteur. So they really select the topics that are currently being negotiated. They meet with the rapporteurs and they gather evidence that then they can be using, at home in their discussions in their own parliaments, or it has been explained by Fina before. If you have a constitutional requirement in the future, it might go through the parliament in an EEA EFTA states, and it's important that they have been discussing these issues upfront. So it are issues to be approved then at home. They can do it and they know about the topics. Formally, they express their views in forms of resolutions and reports. The EEA agreement foresees that at least once a year they adopt one specific resolution on the annual report of the EEA Joint Committee. And in this resolution, they may also touch upon different issues that are currently politically relevant. In recent years, they have been touching about the consequence of the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the rule of law in Poland, for example, and usually they concentrate the various opinions in one resolution per year. You see the picture of the two co-chairs. So the chairmanship rotates. It's a co-chairmanship. So usually half of the meeting is chaired by the EP side, half of the meeting chaired by the EFTA representative. So the last meeting was on 19 and 20 October in Strasbourg. Mr. Andreas Schwab from the IMCO committee is the chair of the EU delegation and meeting regularly with us. The chair on the EFTA side last year was Mrs. Ingeborg Olof Isaksen, and it was Iceland. This year it's Norway. And the next meeting will take place next week, actually, again in Strasbourg. Normally, we alternate between once in Strasbourg, once in an EEA EFTA states, but there, for practical reasons, it's going to be again in Strasbourg. And the co-chairmanship will be Mr. Schwab, and on our side will be Mrs. Trine Elise Sundnes from the Norwegian Parliament. On the agenda, Ukraine, the reform of the energy markets. We're going to discuss the single market emergency instrument that was created after the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to discuss the Inflation Reduction Act in the US and the Europe response that may also impact EEA EFTA states. That's why also we have invited the ESA president to discuss, the state aids, subventions. It also impacts our countries if there are changes that are being made there. If you want to see how these meetings are run, it will be displayed actually on the website of the European Parliament. It's public, so you can just follow the meeting online next Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning, 15 and 16 March, and you can follow this online. Social partners, so trade unions and employers and business organizations in our countries. So the concept is exactly the same. We have our EFTA consultative committee that gathers the social partners on the EFTA side. They join together in this joint body, this EEA consultative committee, and the mandate is the same. It's defined in the Article 96 of the EEA agreement. And they meet, the difference is that they meet once a year, like the Parliamentary Committee twice a year. You see there a picture of the 30th meeting that took place last year in Bergen, and the next meeting is also next week in Stockholm. So it's the EU side, the European Economic and Social Committee, which is in the lead for organizing the meeting. And the 31st meeting will take place next week. The committee also expresses its view in form of resolutions and reports, and is pretty active. They adopt usually 2 resolutions and reports per meeting, and these resolutions and reports are then channeled to the joint bodies, so the EEA Council and the EEA Joint Committee, for their consideration. Next week, they will discuss the European Economic Political Community. They will adopt a resolution on this. And the other one, I have my colleague Pietro at the end of the room, who is in charge of the meeting. Energy resilience, yeah, thank you. So there was also something that was discussed by the Parliamentarians last time. And these two resolutions and report will then be distributed to the joint bodies, EEA Council and Joint Committee. Then we go to the last part, so this EEA EFTA forum. So I explained a little bit before, so it's an informal body that was actually created by the EEA EFTA states, by the standing committee that you have heard about before. It's a forum for local and regional authorities, elected representative, and they discuss also EEA matters at local and regional level. They usually meet at least once a year. And I have mentioned that they have established also informal links with the Committee of the Region, since it's not foreseen by the EEA agreement as such. They also formulate their views in forms of opinions. And the last meeting took place last December here in this house. And they adopted, I just gave them one example, an opinion on the urban wastewater treatment directive. And they really like spent some time on it. They came up with clear recommendations and that they put in their opinion. And this opinion again was channeled to the standing committee, so the EFTA member states. But we also shared it with the European Parliament and the very relevant committees dealing with that, and with the Economic and Social Committee. And it raised quite a lot of interest from the different institutions. So I have done the tour of, the joint body established to deal with the EEA agreement for the parliamentarian social partners and the local and regional representatives. But you have heard also this morning, how do the EEA EFTA states coordinate themselves before meeting the EU institutions? So we can also ask ourselves how in the EFTA institutional structure do these different committees interact with their own member states and representatives. So I have added a little slide on this. How do they discuss actually the EEA cooperation inside EFTA, or in the EFTA context, or in the EFTA pillar? So the left-hand side of the first slide that I showed you before. And basically, when EFTA created these institutions to interact with the EU, there is an agreement on a standing committee. So the committee where the ambassadors meet and coordinate before meeting with the EU in the joint committee. This agreement foresees that the member state can seek the advice of the parliamentary committee and the consultative committee. And there's also an agreement on the Committee of Member of Parliament of the EFTA states. So it's like the parliamentary committee for the 3 EEA EFTA states, that also foresees that they can meet with ministers when the ministers meet before the EEA Council. So basically, there are established regulations and agreements that foresees discussion, dialogue, cooperation in the EFTA pillar. So usually the two committees, they meet at least once a year with the EEA EFTA Foreign Affairs ministers, usually in autumn here at the EFTA House. And they will have a dialogue on the EEA cooperation, the challenges, the issues, before the ministers then meet together with the EU in the EEA Council. Not next week, but in a couple of weeks, also the EFTA Consultative Committee is used to meet with the Standing Committee, so the EEA EFTA ambassadors that you have heard of earlier before, and they also discussed, EEA cooperation between ourselves, so to say, in the EFTA family. And of course, when the parliamentary committee, the consultative committee organize meetings, sometimes they have meetings specifically on single market legislation, internal market, EEA. Sometimes they meet together, the parliamentary committee and the social partners. And the idea is always, to get used to the legislation on EEA cooperation, and then channel information to the member states. So that are the joint bodies basically, and there are the discussion within the EFTA family. So a couple of final remarks. So we have added a layer out of all the institutions and bodies that are involved in EEA cooperation, but these bodies are important because they are an important communication channel to their constituency at home, with the political, economic and social civil society life in member states. So this committee, they bring the EEA cooperation closer to the citizens, and therefore it ensures democratic accountability and the legitimacy of the EEA agreement. So we'll stop here.